Okay, so here's part two. So I left off speaking about the military. So now I just want to mention I recognized this year how I literally repeated my first relationship. Like I mentioned, I only had 3 real relationships that I actually I guess consider, because when I was dating that first guy, I lost my virginity to him, but I was dating someone else that I also had sex with like around the same time, to be honest with you. And one of them I loved since high school. At least I thought that's what it was, love. And the other, I met him, one of them I loved since the beginning years of high school, and the other I met him at a later time when my family moved from the Eastern Shore back to the Baltimore area. So when we were back up that way, I met, the other guy who, because he was living there, had more access to me, had more time to be on me. And I wasn't really interested in being in a relationship, but he was very persistent. He made it seem like he really wanted to be with me, and was talking about marriage and this, that, and the third. And I just was like, okay, because I was young and this was my first relationship, and I'm like, somebody really loves me, and he used to do things like my father used to do, where he would buy me things. He helped me pay for college. He did a lot of cool things. We traveled together. We had a lot of fun. But with that happening, those things I let distract what was really going on, and the factor of love not being what it wasn't true respect. He was cheating on me. He lied to me. He always acted like I couldn't know everything about what was going on with him. His phone was a big secret. And then the abuse started very early on, it was verbal abuse, calling me names, calling me ugly, saying I wasn't this, I wasn't that. If I tried to change my style, he had a problem with it. He didn't like me going places. He didn't like me doing things. But because I was used to being raised that way, I thought that's how men should be. And he was so much like my father. And when he met my father, before my father got to that point where he kicked me out, it was like they were cool. So I'm like, oh, this is the person I'm supposed to be with, because he's just like my dad. Not thinking like, I don't even want someone who's like my dad. I want someone different, someone that's divinely made for me, that God created for me, for the person that I am, because I'm not my mother. And I don't want to be married to someone who is the replicate of my father. I want my father to learn how to have a relationship with me as his daughter. And I realized this year, you can't force a person to not be a certain way. And that's when I learned about narcissism and empathy. And, like I said, I had to learn that my parents, they carry the both traits too. But more so at their age, they give off more of a narcissistic persona to me, because I was their first child. Now my siblings, they get probably maybe a little bit less of that narcissistic side because they're younger, and my parents are older, and they know and understand that they have to be more empathetic and more in tune with them and love them with care, with tender. What I'm saying is that my father, he loved me, but it was more like shaping, like almost like I was a little boy, but my brother came right after me. But a lot of the hard love came because I was the first child. So it was like trying to make sure that I wasn't out here doing nothing I wasn't supposed to be doing. I didn't lose my virginity till I was 18, because I was like, shoot, my dad gonna shoot me in the head, gonna kill you, whatever you dealt with, and I always looked at him as what he portrayed. He was a fighter, so he used to fight before I was even born. Every dad was. So, and then how he was portrayed by family was even how he was supposed to be this person that was going to end up in jail and, all this stuff. And then he ended up proving a lot of that as wrong. He went through his own spiritual awakenings, but I think because he's a person who kind of suppresses his personal feelings to himself, he didn't really share his actual experiences, because he didn't want his children to think that they had to repeat those things. So I completely understand my dad, and I love him, and I know that it's going to take time, but I'm always willing to build a relationship with the people I love. And like I said, this year was about the main thing, forgiving. And I forgave my parents after I told them my truth. I expressed how I felt, trust and believe. I had to, because I had to get those burdens off of me. I had to tell them that I was raped in college, that I was molested in elementary school, that there was people fondling on me at that Christian school they had me at. There was a lot of things I had to express to my parents that I never expressed to them, because I didn't know I was supposed to as a child, because I thought the way things were going was the way that life goes. As a child, you don't really know how life is supposed to be. Whatever environment you're in and whatever you're recognizing as a child is what you grow up to know and understand regardless. So for me, as a free spirit, I pushed myself out into the world. I traveled different places purposefully because I wanted to know other things. I always knew based on TV that there had to be more than what the heck I just know. It's more than just traveling in just the US or whatever, especially because my dad was in the Navy. I'm like, there's so many other places to go. But even then, it's like that absentism of, or I don't know if that's a word, but the absence of my father and the absence of my mother, because she worked long shifts and they both worked for the government, was very hard for me, because it was just like I was like a Cinderella. I felt like, I even told them that, I'm like, I felt like a Cinderella. I just was taking care of my siblings, and I love my siblings to the death of me. Like, it's never going to be a time where I don't believe in what my father said about circles. That's a big thing, because at the end of the day, all roads lead home. So no matter where I went in this world, I always knew that I had home to go back to if something was wrong, up until it was like my father kicked me out when I was 17, and I was like, dang, like, okay, so I learned how to survive. I learned how to create my own life. I learned how to establish my own home. And I would live in my car. There's so many times in this decade that I just was like, all right, I can't afford this anymore. I'm gonna go get me a gym membership so I got a shower. I'm gonna go get me a public storage unit so I got somewhere to put my stuff. And I made sure I had a whip, because that was my home. That was where I slept. That was where I laid my head. Or if I had friends, I would sleep at their house, But there was so many times that I didn't look at it like I was homeless, but I was homeless. I was living in my vehicle, and I didn't look at it like I could go home, because my father never extended the hand. He just, looked at it like, oh, well, you should have just came back. But I never, like I said, I never let go of that inner wound. So I had to tell him that a father should love his daughter, in my opinion. As a woman, I felt like it was okay to express to a man, my father, that, buying me things and telling me that you spent $700 on Christmas is not showing me love. I need love. And, I respect my dad so much. So I had to apologize for everything that I said to him and my mother, because of the way that I came off at them. But then I came to the realization that, those were my pains. And there were triggers with relationships that I had, because there were men, I would date older men, and trying to, the money, and things to my mother and how she would accept it. It just was like, oh, okay, this is the way the world is. This is how things go in life. There's so much stuff I'm unlearning. Trust and believe, it's not done. But this year of self journeys was probably the best year for me. And as I carry it over into 2020, I don't know yet how I'm going to format it. I just know that this year I got to just unravel so much stuff, so much pain, and unload so many things that needed to be taken off of my spirit, so that I can revamp and make newness for myself. And this year particularly, I learned about how triggers can be. Like I said, it was like a study of human psychology from the world's perspective, as well as from my experiential situations. And pretty much I realized that triggers can be good or bad. You can be triggered by meeting someone that does something to you, that somebody did something to you a long time ago, or that even your soul recognizes, because soul contracts and soul ties are a real thing. And then you just snap, or you might want to kill somebody, or you might want to rob somebody, or do something wild or crazy. Or you could meet somebody who reminds you of somebody you loved before, or is familiar, but you've never dated someone like them before. But when you were a child, you fantasized this person, you don't even remember. But naturally, your spirit is like, it's a trigger, because you've seen them and you're like, ooh, that's the kind of woman I wanted, or that's the kind of man I've always dreamed to have, based on the physical appearance, not realizing that that person is not who you dreamt about, or not the person you've dated before. You have to take the time to get to know people when you want to invest in another person being in your life. But it's necessary to be a whole individual. Being a whole individual means taking time to get to know yourself. People always can say, oh yeah, I know who I am. But it's like, when we get into these relationships, we start to see the patterns. And that's why I said I can only respect and appreciate the man that I married, because he's the first marriage I've had. And no matter what goes from here, if I never get married again, or if I do, or we end up back together, or if I'm with somebody who courts me one day, who actually is the man for me, then it'll be a thing where it's like, okay, I know how to be a whole woman now, because I took the time to study myself and to learn how to be good to a man, not on the basis of how my mother treated my father, or how my father treated my mother, or how my father treated me, or how I seen him treat, other people, or other things around me. I just stopped paying attention to everything in this world, to unlearn bullcrap, to relearn my own way of living, my own systematic belief system and everything, you know, because it's more to life than just love. But, you know, I thought I had it all good because of how I was establishing my life in the flesh. But I was living on bucket list stuff. I was doing all kind of craziness. You know, even when I was stripping, it was just like, all right, I'm just gonna make this fast money. And I was like, I'm not gonna get addicted. And even one of my friends that I was dealing with that, you know, I had feelings for, you wouldn't even know I caught feelings. It is because of the fact that I knew how to disconnect. Simply because of my upbringing, being a military child. I knew I would meet friends and I'd be like, all right, I'm moving. And I had to get used to just always losing people. So when I was an adult, I was used to dating men. And then when I found out they're dating someone else or they're in a relationship, I'm like, oh, well, you know, that means that we can't deal with each other anymore. And I'm not realizing like what I'm doing wrong, who I'm hurting in the background, what's going on behind the scenes, and not even recognizing that a lot of men have a lot of things that they have to break down and do different as well. And no matter what the age is only a number. Age is literally only a number, because if we do not face the truth about ourselves and our inner wounds and forgive, it's about observing. When you're doing a self journey, you have to observe, accept, and forgive. That forgiveness piece is the tie to it all. If you do not forgive, then you're going to keep seeing yourself repeating cycles. And when you do meditation, when you pray, when you really take time to have stillness out of your days and it builds, you start to see the world in a different light. And then you start to see your own life and you're like, hold up, I'm living in a matrix. I'm living in some kind of like wheel. And then you start to feel like a lunatic. I know I felt like I was going crazy this year. I literally, if I didn't call on God, I probably would have lost it. I probably would have got sent to somebody's psych ward or whatever, because I probably would have been on the street somewhere. Who knows? Simply because I was in that bed losing my mind. So I definitely think I'm thankful that, you know, I'm thankful for my mother-in-law for having raised her children to be more opposite to how my parents raised me, where they raised me physical and taught me how to be out here and learn how to survive without, you know, something. And then, you know, she taught them more how to be the internal love, you know, how to actually spiritually love themselves, how to be there for themselves, and that they had her because she gave them a voucher, and they had somewhere to be, you know, they had a building to go to and not have to worry about any type of bashing or anything about who they were. So for me, meeting him last year was probably the best experience to breaking my shell, breaking my norms, breaking my old self, and finding a newness about myself. I went from 160 pounds to 115. Now I'm like 125. I'm going up because I've been working out and taking care of myself a lot more upon the mutual divorce that me and my husband had. But you know, we cool. I don't have no problems with him. It's just the fact that I know now that this was a journey that we had to take so that we can become better as people, so that we can become whole, so that we can really focus on our purpose. And that's what we got to do in general, is focus on our purpose. And love is something that is divine. God gives that to you. He will present to you who you're meant to be with. He will, if I never am with my husband again, I only pray that he is designed and taken care of by God to have the best experience with finding a woman, and that he's happy and that he's faithful and that he's a whole man when this happens, because he deserves, and that he meets a good woman and he's able to discern the goodness of her when he meets her, you know. And this video about to cut off, so I'm probably gonna have to do a part 3. So